Erosion is the process of moving sediment from one location to another. Remember that weathering is the process of breaking rocks down into sediment. So weathering breaks the rocks down into sediment. And then erosion is the process of moving sediment from one location to another. And this can happen with water and wind, ice and gravity, which also all affect how rocks are weathered as well. In this picture, you should notice that definitely erosion has occurred. The street is collapsing. Even what some of the man-made structures that have been built haven't been able to prevent erosion. Running water causes erosion. So this is going to be runoff, which is when snow melts on a mountain and runs down mountains or hills, rivers, and streams. Runoff can also happen when we get heavy rains. It tends to run downhill. Even if you live in a flat area, it's still going to run downhill. And this is what will create a lot of the different changes that you see in the landscape on Earth. So again, erosion is the movement of sediment, okay? And it'll move this sediment from one location to another. Sometimes it just moves it a short distance. Sometimes it is moved a larger distance. This is what will help create some of our canyons, such as the Grand Canyon, because the river has carved its way through. It's not only broken down the rock into sediment, but it's then carried that sediment further down. So that's why we get some beautiful canyons, gorges, and even some of our beaches are created by weathering and erosion. So again, water causes erosion. This rushing water that you see in this river or waterfall here is moving sediment from one location to another. And erosion from running water is going to change how much is eroded based on the slope of the hill or how steep it is, the volume of water that is coming down through a river or a stream, and whether it is a rocky or smooth stream, smooth beach or rocky beach is going to determine how much sediment is moved from one location to another. So volume is the amount of water that's being moved. The greater the volume of water that is flowing down a river, the more soil that can get moved, the larger pieces of rock can get moved, more sand can be moved in a shorter amount of time. However, if there is less amount of water, then not as much sediment will be moved. So in our heavy rainstorms, that increases the volume in rivers, so more sediment can be moved from one location to another. So that's why flooding causes erosion to happen quicker than it would be seen if we didn't have floods. And then the slope, the steeper the slope, the more sediment can be moved, and the less steep, or the gradient, if it's less steep, then not as much sediment moves. Rocky river bottoms tends to trap sediment and doesn't allow it to be moved, whereas if it's a smooth bottom and maybe a shallow stream and there's not a lot of huge rocks in it, then the sediment can be carried for quite a long ways before it is deposited. So again, we're talking about runoff. Runoff can run down these hills into the valleys, and it takes with it any topsoil or sand or smaller rock pieces, and then can deposit it sort of in this riverbed. And the river will continue to weather or break down the rocks, and then move those sediments to other locations. Ice causes erosion as well. So when we talk about ice, we're talking about huge glaciers that can move larger pieces of rock or scrape rock like you see here over time. Glaciers don't move very quickly, they move slowly, and it sort of picks up different pieces along the way of rock and stone and other sediment and moves it usually from the upper parts of the mountain to down below. And it also glaciers create these sort of U-shaped valleys that you see here. So again, it's carrying sediment. This is a glacier. This is where it ends. There's this lake here. It's carrying sediment. A lot of it will fall out along the way, and then a lot of it can be deposited sort of on this beach by the lake. So a U-shaped valley, which is any valley that sort of a glacier has come through, is created by the glacier. It sort of carves it out. You'll notice that the top of these mountains are jagged because the glacier wasn't really here. It wasn't flowing down the tops. So as it flows down the side, it actually smooths out these sides, and then it keeps carving the valley. So gravity is kind of helping with this process to bring the glacier as far down as it can go. Wind erosion. So wind weathers pretty easily, but it also, as it picks that sediment up, that sediment is also abrading the rock, like you could see in this picture. If it was windy, that any sand it would pick up from here, these rocks would be abraded away. It would chip off chunks, and those chunks might get caught in the wind, and then they would be moved to other locations. If it's really windy out, you get more sediment that is moving a greater distance, and if it is less windy, then the sediment isn't moving as far. So then wind erosion, its greatest impacts, we have deserts, because there's not a lot of things to stop sort of these dust storms that happen, so it's going to pick up a lot of that sand and move it from one location to another. It helps create sand dunes, whether it's in the desert or even at the beach. Some of those sand dunes are also created by the water at the beach. And then it also removes fertile topsoil, so less likely to sort of be able to grow things if it is really windy. Gravity. So gravity can cause erosion. It doesn't impact weathering as much, but it does impact erosion, such through landslides, rock falls, and mud flows. These happen pretty quickly, where soil, sand, or silt is loosened, and then all of a sudden any of the trees or bushes or shrubs that are growing will just sort of slide out from underneath themselves. Usually causes quite a bit of damage. So gravity, we have landslides, rock falls, and mud flows. Landslides are just a lot of soil and rock that slide down steep slopes. So if steep slopes don't have a ton of plants to sort of hold all of that together, because plant roots anchor some of our sand and soil, so they prevent sand and soil from being eroded or moved from one location to another. Rock falls, you can see some of these on road cuts if you drive up any of the highways, 93, 101. Some of you've noticed some chunks of rock have fallen off those road cuts. That would be like what a rock fall is. Sometimes there's signs on the highway saying watch for falling rocks. And a mud flow is like a landslide, except for it involves water, and that's sort of the difference between a landslide and a mud flow. Mud flows involve water. Deposition is when these rock particles that are going through erosion, whether it be water, wind, ice, or gravity, are then deposited in a new location, so they're sort of left to be. And some of the land features that we can see from deposition is deltas, canyons, meanders, which are the little curves in a river, and then along floodplains, so wherever a river floods. So usually up and over the sides of the banks we call the floodplain.